It is by far, no contest, the fastest growing genre of heavy music right now. I really don't think a lot of metal fans understand how popular this stuff actually is. What's up, everybody? I'm Finn McKenty. This is the Punk Rock MBA, and today we are here to talk about trap metal, a subgenre which I think and hope is going to give metal a much-needed kick in the ass and breathe some fresh air into a genre that, frankly, I think has been stagnant for years. And if you're asking yourself, what the hell is trap metal? What that refers to is artists that sound like this, or this. And with trap metal, I feel like metal could be creative and relevant again in a way that it really hasn't been in at least like 10 or 15 years. But only if the fans and the quote-unquote metal establishment will embrace it as the future. Now, will that happen? And why exactly am I so excited about trap metal? Those are the questions that I will answer in this video. So stay tuned for that. And also thank you to my good friend Michael Montoya, aka Morgue Beats, for his help in putting this one together. And also, I did make a playlist for this video. So if you want to hear more of this stuff, hit the link in the description. And also, I want to thank Skillshare for sponsoring this video. You guys know that I'm a huge believer in self-improvement and self-education and building the skills that you need to bring your ideas to life, and Skillshare is a great way to do exactly that. But what a lot of you may not know is that I've actually worked in online education as my day job for the last 7 years, and I sincerely believe in Skillshare. This stuff can and will change your life if you actually put in the work. There's tons of content to explore, real projects to create, and also, very importantly, the support of fellow creatives. And I could go on forever about all the great classes they have, but just a few that I personally suggest are Gary Vaynerchuk's social media class. Honestly, I don't think that I would be here doing what I am now without some of the things that I've learned from him about social media. Also, Rand Fishkin's Introduction to SEO. He's kind of like the Tony Hawk of SEO and just generally an incredibly insightful guy. And also Jessica Hish's hand lettering for designers. She's one of the absolute best in the game at hand lettering, and I love learning from her. Skillshare is also incredibly affordable. If you get an annual subscription, it actually works out to less than 10 bucks a month. And the first 1,000 people to click the link in the description will get a free trial of Skillshare Premium membership. All right, so first of all, let me just start with a brief overview and history of trap metal to give you some context for where we're at today. I'm not actually sure who came up with the term trap metal, but it first came on my radar back in, I think, 2015 or so, when I first discovered Suicideboys. Somehow or another, I stumbled across the video for Paris. And I said, wait, what is this? Like, it sounds like 3 6 Mafia, but it looks like a hardcore show. And these dudes look like they were in some gross punk band that would play on the floor of a punk house that was about to get shut down for having an outbreak of bedbugs. This is awesome. It felt fresh and new to me in a way that I hadn't really felt about alternative music in a few years. I got burned out on any kind of like rock or heavy music around that time, and this is what got me excited about music again. So I went down the rabbit hole and discovered that actually there was a whole scene of this stuff, which I've talked about a million times before, so I'll keep it brief. But basically, I would say there's 2 parts of this. The first is what I would call dark trap, stuff like Bones, Suicideboys, Puya, Fat Nick, which is basically like an edgier take on 90s Memphis rap. And the more extreme version of that, which is what people were calling trap metal, which is basically trap rap, but instead of rapping, screaming, and everything in the mix is turned up to 11 to the point of everything just completely distorting into almost just white noise. The biggest name there is definitely XXXtentacion, who is not a great human being, but you really do have to credit him with popularizing the sound. Not only did he do stuff with mainstream artists like Kanye, he was also doing stuff like this. Way back in like 2017. As well as people like Ski Mask the Slump God, Omen 13, and my personal favorite artist in the genre, City Morgue. I'ma get you, I hit you with a missile. Riding up close, right, you can't miss you. Location, what's the issue? But if I was to pick 2 artists as kind of the highlight of this cohort, it would be Ghostemane and Scarlxrd, who both started to break out in like 2017 or so. and get the attention of metal media outlets like Kerrang, who normally wouldn't cover anything coming out of the alternative rap world. And slowly but surely, it seemed like they were getting the approval of at least some metal fans by 2018 or so. It really felt like something was happening. Bring Me the Horizon took Scarlxrd out on tour. There was that big tour with like Suicideboys, Trash Talk, Turnstile, and Denzel Curry, and it felt like we were on the verge of something really big happening. But for whatever reason, it just kind of didn't. It felt like it sort of stalled out both creatively and commercially. Not like it was dead or anything, it just felt like it was on pause, I guess. There were still tons of people doing trap metal, actually more than ever, but it all just kind of sounded the same to me. Because what is there really left to do once you've taken things to the extremes that people like Scarlxrd did? And don't get me wrong, it's a cool sound, but how much of it can you really listen to? It's basically the same issue that I have with a lot of extreme metal. By design, there's really no melody in the music, and once the shock value of like, holy shit, I can't believe they did that, wears off, it gets kind of tiring, and once you've heard one song in the genre, you kind of heard them all. And with the genre's biggest star, XXXtentacion, dead, there wasn't really anybody left to carry the genre as the face of it, like he'd been doing. Scarlxrd definitely still does well, but I actually get the sense that he doesn't really want to be a star per se. I mean, I think that's probably part of the reason why he wears a mask. And I actually totally respect that. I think it's probably a very good choice for his mental health because being a star is probably not healthy for most people, but it does mean that he won't be the face of the genre. And I would say something similar for Ghostemane. He's also doing really, really well, don't get me wrong, he's killing it, and I'm really excited for him, but he's kind of moved on creatively from trap metal, and I also think he doesn't really care about being like mainstream famous. He's had many, many opportunities to be on a major label, and he's chosen to stay indie, which again, I completely respect, and I think it's the right choice for him, but it means he can't be that transcendent breakout star. And I was kind of bummed, to be honest, because I saw so much potential in trap metal and dark trap, and I felt like it had maybe kind of fizzled a little bit. Like this was as big as it was gonna be. But over the last year or so, I've seen a few things that made me reconsider and think that maybe I spoke too soon. And maybe it can be the thing that makes metal relevant again. If, and this is a big if, the metal fans can open their minds a bit and change a few things about the way they think. And let me explain exactly what I'm talking about here. If Scarlxrd, Bones, XXXtentacion, and Ghostemane were trap metal 1.0, I think that we are now into trap metal 2.0, and it's pretty cool. The main thing is that trap metal is now actually metal. And what I mean by that is that I always thought trap metal was kind of a weird term because it wasn't actually metal. I mean, I get where they were coming from, screaming over distorted 808s like this is aggressive as fuck, so I understand what they were going for, but it really reminded me more of industrial music than it did metal. But what I'm hearing now from newer artists like Mimi Barks, I Am Jake Hill, and my personal favorite artist right now, Mugxtsu, is much closer to what I would call actual trap metal, with a mix of trap drums, deathcore type vocals, and a lot of heavy, djenty guitars. Or on the more hip-hop side of that, Kenny Mason, who I've talked about before and love, is almost like 21 Savage goes gent on a few songs. I feel like they've finally figured it out. Like this feels very fresh to me and combines the best parts of metal, which would be the riffs and the intense vocals, with the best parts of trap, which are just the overall vibe and the fact that it grooves and you can kind of chill to it a little bit because they're not just beating you over the head with blast beats and double bass all the time. And what I think really makes this work and makes it different from all the like terrible cringy rap metal out there is that they use the guitars like a sample, just the same as a rap song might use a loop of a flute or whatever. Only in this case, it's an 8-string playing a gent riff. It doesn't sound like somebody rapping over a metal song, and that is a good thing because rap metal is trash and sounds very dated, very 90s. There's nothing fresh or new about that at all. And we're also seeing it from the other side of the fence, with metalcore and deathcore bands starting to incorporate trap elements with varying degrees of success. Polyphia, for example, has been heading in this direction for a while, and I think they'll probably do even more of it. I think they do it well. Tim is a super smart, creative guy who's always ahead of the curve.
So taking inspiration from rap music in general, I tried to make my guitar sound like a rapper.
The deathcore band Within Destruction started adding some trap parts recently, and although it feels a little bit forced to me, not sure it's totally working. I do think it's cool that they're experimenting, and if they keep going with it, I'm sure it'll come together eventually.
We don't give a fuck, don't give a fuck about you.
And it's also worth noting that the most popular metalcore song in years, Popular Monster by Falling in Reverse, is like half trap. To me, it doesn't feel like as smooth or as authentic as something like, say, City Morgue, but you can't deny that this song is huge, it was super successful, so clearly there's an audience for this. Now, personally, I'm not really a fan of metal bands adding the trap stuff for the most part. Like I said, to me, it mostly just sounds like 90s rap metal, which is among the corniest, cringiest music ever made, in my opinion. But metal fans seem to love it, which doesn't surprise me because they tend to be stuck in 2002. So I do get it from a marketing standpoint. It works. Another thing that I'm really excited about and stoked to see is a lot of collabs happening between underground trap metal artists and relatively more mainstream artists. This is a huge part of the pop punk revival we've been seeing, like Mod Sun and Avril, or Travis Barker and MGK collabing with Youngblood and Kenny Hoopla and Ian Dior. And I think there's a ton of potential for the same thing to happen in trap metal. For example, Zillakami of City Morgue just did a song with Lil Uzi Vert.
Yeah, okay, I don't ever miss. How the fuck I come and make you delete your whole shit, yeah.
And of course, Travis Barker, the king of collabs, as part of the trap metal thing too. He did a song with Suicideboys and Munky from Korn.
That's right next to me. Chopped out line, the rest will see. He's dead, so let's just let him be. Release the fucking dogs.
Did another song with Jasiah and NASCAR Aloe. And MGK did a song with Corpse. Now, Corpse may not be the most credible artist in the world, but still, it is a dark trap or trap metal dude doing a song with a Billboard #1 artist. And also, Sid from Slipknot has a song with Lucifena, as just a few examples of what I'm talking about.
Watch it fucking burn! Light up!
So with all of that being said, what makes me ask if this is the future of metal? Why am I so excited about this? Well, for one, it is by far, no contest, the fastest growing genre of heavy music right now. I really don't think a lot of metal fans understand how popular this stuff actually is. For example, there are tons of these artists with well over 1 million Spotify listeners. Zillakami, Jasiah, and Scarlxrd, and Ghostemane, to name just a few. All their music videos get millions and millions of views. XXXtentacion has over 1 billion views on a song. Those numbers are no joke by any standard. And then compare that with the artists that people always tell me are the next big thing in metal, and you'll see what I mean. For example, the band Loathe. They have 159,000 listeners on Spotify. Scarlxrd literally has 10 times as many listeners as they do. And that's no disrespect to Loathe at all. I think they're a solid band. My point is just that this stuff is way, way bigger than anything else in heavy music. There are just no new metal bands putting up those kind of numbers. That's just a fact. And yet metal fans are oftentimes super dismissive of this stuff and talk about it like it's just some passing fad. Well, I mean, maybe it is. That could be true. But honestly, I think that's just kind of a dumb take. I mean, if tens of millions of people are listening to this stuff, then there's definitely something here. And that kind of like dismissive, arrogant thinking is exactly the kind of attitude that's made metal less and less relevant every year. And before anybody says anything about how this is just internet hype and it doesn't mean anything, it definitely translates into live ticket sales too. I went to Ghostemane's last headlining tour back at the end of 2019, and he sold out a 1,500 cap venue on a weekday, and everybody there was losing their shit. This is a real thing. And yet, for the most part, the metal wing of the music industry seems to be pretty much ignoring it. There are a few exceptions, like Scarlxrd was on Island Records for a while. Earache has signed a couple people like Sinizster and Gizmo, which is cool. But that's kind of it as far as I can tell in terms of support from the metal part of the industry. And so on the one hand, it's absolutely baffling to me that these labels keep signing random generic bands with 15,000 monthly listeners on Spotify when there's clearly a huge demand for trap metal. But on the other hand, I get it, because they are in the business of giving their customers what they want. And for the most part, metal fans hate this stuff and want nothing to do with it. And the first reason why is because of stuff like this comment. Metal music is made with musical instruments. Like the idea that because there isn't a band, this can't be metal. Which, first of all, is not even an accurate criticism. For one, there's tons of guitars in trap metal, especially the newer stuff that I mentioned before. So you can tell that the people saying this stuff have literally never even listened to it before passing judgment. Very typical of metal fans. And second, so what if there aren't quote-unquote real instruments? Deal with it. Rock has 808 and trap drums with it, and actually it has since the 90s. This is not a new thing. Metal fans need to get over their weird obsession with quote-unquote real drums, which is also very ironic to me considering that the drums in almost all modern metal are fake as fuck. They're either completely programmed or they've been edited and sample replaced to the point where they might as well have just programmed them. And half the guitarists record their parts like 2 notes at a time, which is fine. I don't care how you make your music. My point is just that nothing about metal production these days is quote-unquote real, so just get off your high horses. Let's also address the elephant in the room, racism, and the role that plays in how resistant the metal scene has been to accept trap metal. There's way more Black and Hispanic people in trap metal than pretty much any other branch of heavy music, which I think is a very good thing because it brings in some much needed diversity into the genre and therefore opens it up to a much larger potential audience that before probably had a hard time seeing themselves in metal. But I'm not so sure that it's a good thing in the eyes of a lot of metal fans who, let's be real, can be kind of racist. I made a whole video about this if you want to watch it, but I don't think that I'm saying anything that most of us didn't already know. And to be clear, I haven't seen anybody explicitly say, like, I'm not going to listen to this because there's Black people in the video. But I do think that the unconscious bias is there for sure. For example, when people see Zillakami wearing metal shirts in a video and assume that he couldn't possibly be a real metal fan, why is that? Would they say the same thing if he was the same tattooed kid in a dying fetus shirt, but he was white? Or would they say, hell yeah, brother, dying fetus. Fuck yeah. Let's just say it, they don't think Black people can be metal. And I know I'm gonna get a lot of pushback on that, but what else am I supposed to think when the fans gush over all these bands full of like generic white dudes, but the moment they see a Black person and hear some trap drums, they get all butthurt? It's really just not a good look. Because if they're not racist, they're sure acting like it. And if you ever want metal to be relevant again, it's just gotta stop, period. End of story. I can't speak to Europe or the rest of the world, maybe it's different over there, but at least here in America, young people here are just not having any of that shit. And if your scene has a problem with latent racism, it's just not gonna be relevant, period. I'd also really like to see the older generation of metal artists embracing this stuff more and doing more collabs. The ones I mentioned before are Start and they're super cool. But I'd like to see even more. Like, I want to see some shit like Zillakami do a song with Kerry King. I want to see like Meshuggah and Scarlxrd, Ghostemane and Converge. That's the kind of shit I want to see. For one, I think we'd get some really cool music out of it. And two, I think it would do a lot for the scene. It would make those older artists relevant again to a new generation. And having the cosign of the older artists means a lot because metal is a very traditionalist kind of culture that really values the opinions of the older people. And so having them cosign on it, I think would make a lot of the younger fans, and the older ones for that matter, maybe finally start to accept it. And as for the trap metal artists themselves, I think the next frontier is finding that big crossover hit. I get the appeal of just like always doing the most extreme stuff you can, and that's cool to a point, but that will always have an inherently smaller audience. If you look at the times that were like a big inflection point for the popularity of metal, it's when artists like Linkin Park, Bring Me the Horizon, or even like Killswitch Engage came along and did something that took like a relatively extreme form of metal and made it more accessible with melody and great songwriting and hooks. Or as maybe the most recent example, around like 2013, 2014, when deathcore bands like Suicide Silence and Whitechapel were actually charting on like the Billboard top 10 or 20, and it's because they slowed things down a little bit, they put in some new metal influences in there, added some clean singing, and made it just a little bit more digestible than just like riff salad of nonstop tremolo riffs and breakdowns. Don't get me wrong, I love old Suicide Silence, I love tremolo riffs and breakdowns, but if you want to take things to the next level, sometimes you got to change things up a bit. And before anybody says that I'm telling them to water down their music to pander to the masses, I'm not. I think of it more as like a creative challenge. Because they've already answered the first question that I think they set out to answer, like what would happen if you took rap to the most extreme place you possibly could? They did that. They checked that box because the next step beyond stuff like Sematary is just like pure white noise. But what they haven't done as artists is to take that same foundation and sound and go the other direction and turn it into something with hooks like Bring Me the Horizon did with metalcore, or like In Flames did with death metal. And I would love to see them take on that challenge, because I think there's a lot of interesting creative possibilities there. But regardless of what happens, I'm stoked for it, and I am a huge fan of what's happening in the trap metal scene. This is the most like fresh, exciting creative energy that I've seen since probably the MySpace deathcore days. And I think they're gonna succeed whether the metal fans come along or not. If metal fans open their mind and start accepting it, great, that's awesome. And I hope they do. But if they don't, you know what? That's fine too. There's way too much momentum here behind these artists to stop it. There's a real community here that believes in this stuff, and they don't need the approval of a bunch of dusty metal gatekeepers. But if you are one of those metal gatekeepers, my suggestion is don't get left behind. Because this stuff is not just the future of metal, it's the present. Alright my friends, that does it for this video on trap metal. Let me know what you think in the comments about where you see this stuff going, and will metal fans ever come around and start accepting it? Before I let you go, I wanted to mention the Punk Rock MBA podcast. There's a new episode every Monday, link to that in the description of this video. And I also wanted to plug some of my merch. For example, this neon cartoon monster shirt straight out of 2009. I've also got this pop punk with breakdown shirt. Shout out to Andre Feely for the idea on this one. And this shirt inspired by the good old days of MySpace deathcore, including an edgy slogan in impact font on the back. You can get all those at the link in the description of this video. And lastly, I want to thank everybody who supports us on Patreon, especially those of you who support at the True Cult level or above. It is because of your support that we're able to do a lot of things on the channel. For example, that's how I pay for the podcast. So thank you very much for your support. They get every podcast a week early. There's a members-only private Discord server that I hang out in all the time. I do giveaways. I do patron-only Q&As. There's a way to have me review your music or video or artwork or anything else you would like my eyes and ears on. So if you want to join us on Patreon, you can do that at the link in the description. And with that, I'm going to sign off for now, but I will see you next time.